What's up, guys? Welcome to ACROCast, the podcast all about industrial and embedded I/O, brought to you by Vic Myers Associates and Acromag. We'll be talking about the applications and technology they've been involved in for over 60 years. Hello, everyone, and welcome to ACROCast. This is Ryan Christian. This is our second episode, and once again, I've got my good friend, Mr. Bill Whitmer from Acromag here to talk about the solutions that they bring to the table for industrial I/O and signal conditioning. So thanks again, Bill, for joining us on this second episode of ACROCast.
Well, thank you, Ryan. It's really good being back here, and I look forward to continuing these sessions. And I think we have some really good information that we can help share with customers. We should go ahead and get it started.
All right, that sounds good, Bill. Thanks so much. Let's talk about what's new and exciting at Acromag. What is the process division up to, and what are you guys bringing out in 2022 that everybody should be excited about?
Well, that's a great choice of words there, Ryan, because our newest product is called the NT series, and the NT stands for New Technology. It's our newest remote I/O answer, and we are in the first stage of rolling it out. We have several stages. It's going to be ongoing because of some features I'll tell you about later. But right now, we finished the first stage. We've got discrete I/O, analog I/O, and thermocouple units coming out. In the next stage, we're going to be coming up with some combination units, relay outputs, and some RTDs.
Very good. Well, it doesn't get any better than that when the new technology acronym is NT. And there we go. We've got an NT series product coming from Acromag. I know you guys have already kind of in that first phase, getting ready for second phase. So let's talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. Maybe first, before we dive into the details, let's talk about how the NT series really differs from previous versions of your remote I/O products.
Well, not completely differs, but we've gone back to having web browser configuration. We used to have it in our 900 series, or we still have it in our 900 series. We went to a USB configuration with our XTs, and a lot of customers expressed the desire to be able to remote back into the units, especially customers that were in a clean room environment or had products in a hazardous area. It's much easier for them to remote in from their office as opposed to having to suit up and go into a clean room and plug in a USB connector. But other things that we've changed that are new is we've added Expandable Io, so you can add on more I/O at a lower cost per channel. Just plug them right in. A really neat feature that's coming in is field updatable firmware. So it saves everybody the downtime of having to get an RMA, send the unit back into us, and have us update the firmware to add features or bug fixes.
Yeah, that'd be huge.
Yeah, I agree. And another place where that is already huge is in the defense industry. Mm-hmm. Once they get their hands on something and they've qualified it or whatever, they're very, very reluctant to let it get back into somebody else's hands. They're very worried about security that way. And this way, it never leaves their hands. It always remains on site and almost, only down for the minute and a half or so it takes to update the firmware. What we were also, another neat feature is we're adding user selectable communication protocol. So if you're in the middle of this long project and halfway through the project before implementation, the protocol changes, you don't have to buy new hardware. It's going to be something where you can just select the new protocol from the drop-down menu. One more feature that we have is multicast. We still have our old I2O peer-to-peer networking, but multicast is, to my knowledge, unique, where one input unit or sending unit can send a signal without a controller to multiple output units. And it's really almost limitless how many output units you can send to. And the only thing that we do require is that you use discrete sending to discretes and analog to analog.
Well, that's going to be super interesting. We might have to dive into that a little bit deeper on another ACROCast. I could see applications where that could be really helpful. Multicasting. I know there's other technologies that we represent that do have some of that capability for the telemetry and defense market, where you've got a distributed network of signals. So that could be really interesting to see how that applies. And so, I mean, overall, it sounds like a little bit of a change in that you've gone away from the Windows software back to a web-based software, very user-friendly that way. It's now expandable, field upgradable, user selectable, and then this multicasting feature, which you talked about. So those are, that's really, you're jam packing it with some really good features that will differentiate not only this product from other products on the market, but just growing on the technology you guys have been making for years. So that's pretty exciting.
I think so.
So what, obviously you're kind of in a phased release of all of these solutions. What features will Acromag add to the NT with future firmware releases?
That's what's really cool about this, is because, we really don't know where it's going to end up. We have plans in place for what we want to add next, but we've increased the amount of processing capabilities. We've increased memory to allow us to add more features as we see fit and as feedback from the field comes to us that we need to add. So in the meantime, I mentioned multiple protocols. Right now, we only have Modbus TCP/IP. Next month, we plan on adding Ethernet IP and Profinet support, probably towards the end of Q1. And at some point, we're going to add support for MQTT and RESTful API. And there's lots of potential other protocols and things that we can add beyond that. We're also in the process of adding conditional logic, like if, then, else, and other math functions. If anyone out there is familiar with our IntelliPack products, it's going to be, at least to start, along the same lines as those. What's really cool about that is it gives you local control while you can still port data up to the cloud for analysis. But an example that I like to use is about the local control is, let's say you've got a tank level that you're monitoring, and you can use the logic to tell when to turn a pump on or off, or when to open a valve drain, or something along that line. And let's say somewhere along the line, the Ethernet cable gets cut between you and between this unit and between the controller. You lose that data right there. Right now, we don't have data logging capabilities, but we are planning to add that as one of our future things also. But even though you lose that communication with the PLC or controller, you still have localized control. So the levels maintain in the acceptable ranges while you diagnose the problem, whether it be a switch or router or cable that's cut. And I think that's a pretty neat combination of things.
Yeah, it gives them a lot of flexibility and a little bit of redundancy in case something does happen. They still have access to making process adjustments in the field. So that could be really useful, depending on what happens at the site that would cause that that termination of communications. But so I guess really the summary here is that because of the field upgradable firmware, you guys are going to continue to develop this product. And for customers who get involved early with the product for their applications, they're going to be able to upgrade their firmware in the future and be able to take advantage of the things you're talking about, these additional protocols, for example. And not only that, but other functions that you build in, like the logic with the math or logic, conditional logic. So that's just, it's pretty awesome that someone can get involved with the product line early, and because it's field upgradable for the firmware, they can actually take advantage of those features that come in, phase 2 all the way through whatever phase you guys go through on this, or for some indefinite future. I don't know. Is there any plan to limit how long they can upgrade those, or is that
There's nothing in place. And first, let me back up a bit by saying absolutely. That's one of the things that's got me excited about this.
Right. I can see that.
All this. And right now, there's nothing in place for limiting the amount of time or fees involved for the firmware updates or something.
Right, no
like
maintenance or software licensing for firmware updates or anything like that. Okay, great.
There may be some point at some point in the future where there is a fee to, if a specific feature is added. There may be, but I've not heard any talk of it at this time.
So it's going to stay flexible for the near future for sure, which is really what we're talking about, is the new release of the product, and the flexibility will be there as you guys are developing. So that's just that feature alone. I think that's going to get people excited. Let's break into maybe the applications or the problems that you see the NT series solving. How does it actually work, or how does it make things easier for our customers?
Well, one thing that I've had people asking me for years is higher density of temperature measurements. And by density, I mean more channels per unit. And there's so many applications out there where a lot of temperature measurements are needed. And our previous products would have either only 4 or 6 channels per unit. Now, with the NT, physical makeup, the fact that you could take a base unit with IO on board and then add more IO cards to it without adding the Ethernet portion cards, you could take an NTE 2611, which has the Ethernet, and then 3 expansion units, NTX 2611, and plug them together. And you could have 32 thermocouple channels on a single unit. And you don't pay for the extra Ethernet connections. And there's some other nice features about that we'll go into in a bit. But one of those features is having a single IP address on the NTEs with the expanded channel count. It reduces the number of IP addresses in the plant overall, as compared to the older models. And what that will do is it will reduce or limit the licensing fees for the SCADA systems or IT support fees that are based on the number of IP addresses in the system.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah. One thing that OEMs and system integrators really like are the idea of multiple protocols. Knowing that they can design a system and it'll drop right into anybody's network without having to, order specific hardware for each protocol. You buy one set of hardware, you build your product, put it on the shelf if that's what you do. You sell it to a customer, and when you go to install it and get it running, all the installation tech has to do is pull down the correct protocol from a drop-down window, and that's got people pretty excited.
Yeah, I could see that being a big deal. So really you're talking about, in terms of solving problems, you're really talking about customers who especially have these high density, high channel count situations. And by high density, we're talking beyond the 4, 6, 8. So in the example you gave, you've got the base unit, the NTE, and then you add on 3 additional NTX boxes, and immediately you have 32 channels all in one unit, all in one IP address, which really gives the customer the ability to interface with their SCADA system with a single IP address. Again, can't underemphasize the fact that you guys are saving customers money by the way that you've architected the solution. They can get all the channels they need in this particular setup, 32 channels on a single IP address, which traditionally I know that would probably be split out maybe to 2 or 3 IP addresses depending on the manufacturer. So just all in all, a huge value add in terms of cost and complexity, with all that being on a single IP address. And then again, you said it, when you have systems integrators who are integrating and putting these projects together, whether they design a system up front or whether they buy stuff and put it on their shelf, because they can field change or software select their protocol, this is going to give them a huge amount of flexibility. So they could drop this in to pretty much any application, select the protocol they need in the web-based software, and they're off and running. That's pretty powerful.
Yes, it is. And we use the temperature as an example, but if we were talking discretes, then you could have up to 64 channels in a single IP address.
Yeah, so it obviously it's going to depend on the signals, but that's a good example, since temperature seems to be one of those parameters that seems to creep up once you're working on an application and someone's taking measurements on a dryer wall or whatever it is. They tend to want to instrument the heck out of it so they can get all sorts of readings from across a surface or across a room or different parts of the process. So the number can grow quickly, especially considering the temperature sensor itself is not super expensive. So they can scale up the number of points pretty quickly. But then getting that back to a data collection point, a SCADA system, PLC, that's where the cost tends to add up pretty quickly. So that's great. I think knowing that and just kind of a general understanding of how that all works will be great for customers. So I'm curious what kind of feedback you're getting. I mean, you've been doing this for a while in terms of promoting the product and starting to get it out there. Are you getting any feedback? What are you hearing at this point?
Yes, we are. What Mike mentioned earlier, the reduced numbers of IP addresses are saving the customers money, and they, of course, everybody loves to save money.
Yeah, that's just an easy one. Love it.
The multiple protocols, it's really cool because it will reduce the amount of inventory that people will need if they're OEMs or system integrators. It also reduces the number of part numbers that need to be maintained in the ERP system, and that's going to be a growing concern by especially a lot of larger companies are really doing a push right now to reduce the number of part numbers in their systems. Mm-hmm. Another thing which is no surprise, is the ability to mix and match the type of I/O in these units. So if you need 16 discrete I/O, 8 channels of temperature, and maybe say 6 channels of relay alarm outputs, you can match those all up into one unit and really customize the I/O for your application without paying for additional components that aren't really needed. And the whole idea of the NTX and expansion is really cool in that regards. One thing that did surprise me is from our existing customers, we're hearing that the new I2O that we have, not the multicast, but just our regular old I2O, in the past for our discrete units, you had to map 4 channels at a time. Whereas in this one, you can map each channel individually. And like I said, this one surprised me. I didn't think it would be a big deal, but we're hearing a lot of people saying that that's really helping them out a lot because it gives them more options and it lets them use some of their other channels in different ways.
Right. It's flexibility. You've taken it from mandatory mapping of groups and turned it into individual, single, discrete channel mapping. And that just gives people flexibility. And in a lot of the cases where I when I talk to customers, flexibility tends to be the name of the game, especially early on in the design phase, especially because you may not have the full scope or full understanding. So when customers are looking for solutions, the more flexibility they can have, the better that'll be. And I think that also speaks to what you talked about in terms of the base unit, the NTEs, and the NTX expansion cards, being able to build the I/O solution and kind of customize it and minimize the cost all at the same time. Again, it's all about that flexibility. So you couple that with the cost savings of the IP address and the multiple protocol software selection capabilities. I could just see the feedback growing in the future on those topics. I think those are all market leaders for this type of technology. So I would not be surprised if we keep hearing similar stories like that in the future, and I think we will. So I'll look forward to that. What do you think in terms of the flexibility, which we were just talking about? I mean, really, is there anything more? Is there anything more that customers want than flexibility in your mind?
No, not really. I mean, yes, of course, there's a lot of things that they want, but flexibility is key. And it's really the whole basis behind this product line. And what's really neat about it is the fact that we have the firmware upgrade in the field. It allows us to keep adding features that our customer base needs and allow them to have more flexibility and more choices and more capabilities in the future.
Yeah, I think that just seems to be a reoccurring theme of ACROCast number 2, is that with the NT series, you're going to get a flexible solution. And it's been designed that way on purpose. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this has come from feedback. You guys care about what the customers want and what they need. And so you've been asking these questions over the years, right?
Absolutely. This is all feedback based.
Right.
I personally have been lobbying for the high density temperature measurements for several years now.
Right.
And but it's our customer base and you, our channels, who have gathered this information for us as to what it is that our customers need and will be helpful to them.
Right. So, I mean, it's worth restating that, I mean, Acromag and Vic Myers Associates, we really do exist for our customers and helping them solve the problems. There's a lot of companies out there who design their products on a whiteboard based on their ideas of what they think customers might need in the future. Maybe it's new whiz-bang things or trends, and so they take risks on new products. I get that. But really, the essence of the NT series is a customer-based feedback from the field. And so we just greatly value whenever we get the chance to work with you, our customers. Bill and I know like he said, we've been asking these questions for years to really just try to put together a solution that's going to help long-term to provide the flexibility and solve the problems that we know our end users, our systems integrators, whether it's a small scale operation or a giant plant with thousands of channels, just giving them the flexibility and trying to provide a good user interface, a good customer experience, and not breaking the bank. I mean, that's one thing that We see a lot of the big names out there. They charge a lot for their software licensing. So being able to augment and offset that with some of these solutions really speaks to your guys' commitment to not only help solve the problem, but do it at a cost-effective way and add a lot of value along the way. So I think this is fantastic, Bill. I think we've covered some good ground here. I know that we're excited to start to see some of this stuff in action. We've got orders in the pipeline already that should be shipping out to customers if they haven't already. We've got new things coming, new customers coming down the pipe for 2022. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a great year for the NT series.
I agree. I'm excited also, and I'm also excited to be here doing these podcasts with you, and look forward to more in the future.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, we're in a year and a mindset and a frame of reference where we've had to adapt and grow, and I just appreciate you taking the time to do this, to clue us in and let us in on what's going on at Acromag and with your guys' products. So thanks for doing this. I wish you happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. And to all of our customers out there, thanks for everything in 2021. We look forward to seeing you and helping you with your applications next year.
Thank you, Ryan, and the same to you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for joining us. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode number 2 of the ACROCast. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe. We look forward to seeing you next year. Bye for now.